Right, you know what time it is. It's blog time again. I'm gonna continue with the the thing. Yes. Last time we left off, the Hab is now a bomb because he produced too much hydrogen gas. Log entry Sol 38. I'm still cowering in the rover, but I've had time to think, and I know how to deal with the hydrogen. I thought about the atmospheric regulator. It pays attention to what's in the air and balances it. That's how the excess O2 I've been importing ends up in the tanks. Problem is, it's just not built to pull hydrogen out of the air. The regulator uses freeze separation to sort out the gases. Well, when it decides there's too much oxygen, it starts collecting air in a tank and cooling it to 90 Kelvin. That makes the oxygen turn to liquid, but leaves the nitrogen still gaseous. Then it stores the O2. But I can't get it to do that for hydrogen because hydrogen needs to be below 21 K to turn liquid, and the regulator just can't get temperatures that low. Dead end. Here's the solution. Hydrogen is dangerous because it can blow up, but it can only blow up if there's oxygen around. Hydrogen without oxygen is harmless, and the regulator is all about pulling oxygen out of the air. There are 4 different safety interlocks that prevent the regulator from letting the hob's oxygen content get too low, but they're designed to work against technical faults, not deliberate sabotage. Long story short, I can trick the regulator into pulling all the oxygen out of the hob. Then I can wear a spacesuit and do whatever I want without fear of blowing up. I'll use an O2 tank to spray short bursts of oxygen at the hydrogen and make a spark with a couple of wires and a battery. It'll set the hydrogen on fire, but only until the small bit of oxygen is used up. I'll just do that over and over in controlled bursts until I've burned off all the hydrogen. One tiny flaw with that plan, it'll kill my dirt. The dirt is only viable soil because of the bacteria growing on it. If I get rid of all the oxygen, the bacteria will die. I don't have 100 billion little spacesuits handy. It's half a solution anyways. Time to take a break from thinking. Commander Lewis was the last one to use this rover. She was scheduled to use it on Sol 7, but she went home instead. Her personal travel kit's still in the back. Rifling through it, I found a protein bar and a personal USB, probably full of music to listen to on the drive. Really? Time to chow down and see what the good commander brought along for music. Log entry Sol 38-2. Disco, damn it, Lewis. That's funny, that's funny. That's very funny. Log entry Sol 39. I think I've got it. Soil bacteria are used to winters. They get less active and require less oxygen to survive. I can lower the hob temperature to 1 degree Celsius and they'll nearly hibernate. This sort of thing happens on Earth all the time. They can survive a couple of days this way. If you're wondering how bacteria on Earth survive longer periods of cold, the answer is they don't. Bacteria from further underground, where it is warmer, breed upwards to replace the dead ones. They'll still need oxygen, but not much. I think a 1% content will do the trick. That leaves a little in the air for the bacteria to breathe, but not enough to maintain a fire, so the hydrogen won't blow up. But that leads to yet another problem. The potato plants won't like the plan. They don't mind the lack of oxygen, but the cold will kill them. So we'll have to pot them, we'll bag them actually, and move them to a rover. They haven't even sprouted yet, so it's not like they need light. It was surprisingly annoying to find a way to make the heat stay on when the rover's unoccupied, but I figured it out. After all, I've got nothing but time in here. So that's the plan. First, bag the potato plants and bring them to the rover, making sure it keeps the damn heater on. Then drop the hob temperature to 1 degree Celsius. Then reduce the O2 content to 1%. Then burn off the hydrogen with a battery, some wires, and a tank of O2. Yeah, this all sounds like a great idea with no chance of catastrophic failure. That was sarcasm, by the way. Well, off I go. Log entry Sol 40. things weren't 100% successful. They say no plan survives first contact with implementation. I'd have to agree. Here's what happened. I summoned up the courage to return to the hob. Once I got there, I felt a little more confident. Everything was how I left it. It would take a while to let the hob cool, so I started that right away by turning the temperature down to 1 degree Celsius. I bagged the potato plants and got a chance to check up on them while I was at it. They're rooting nicely and about to sprout. One thing I hadn't accounted for was how to bring them from the hob to the rovers. The answer was pretty easy. I put all of them in Martinez's spacesuit, then I dragged it out with me to the rover I'd set up as a temporary nursery. Making sure to jimmy the heater to stay on, I headed back to the hob. By the time I got back, it was already chilly, down to 5 degrees Celsius already. Shivering and watching my breath condense in front of me, I threw on extra layers of clothes. Fortunately, I'm not a very big man. Martinez's clothes fit over mine, and Vogel's fit over Martinez's. These clothes were designed to be worn in a temperature-controlled environment. Even with 3 layers, I was still cold. I climbed into my bunk and under the covers for more warmth. Once the temperature got to 1 degree Celsius, I waited another hour just to make sure the bacteria in the dirt got the memo that it was time to take it slow. The next problem I ran into was the regulator. Despite my swaggering confidence, I wasn't able to outwit it. It really does not want to pull too much O2 out of the air. The lowest I could get it to was 15%. After that, it flatly refused to go lower, and nothing I did mattered. I had all these plans about getting in and reprogramming it, but the safety protocols turned out to be in ROMs. ROMs? Another acronym we have not introduced. Whatevs. I cannot blame it, but its whole purpose is to prevent the atmosphere from becoming lethal. Nobody at NASA thought, hey, let's allow a fatal lack of oxygen that will make everyone drop dead. Another jab at NASA. So I had to use a more primitive plan. The regulator uses a different set of vents for air sampling than it does for main air separation. The air that gets freeze separated comes into a single large vent on the main unit, but it samples the air from 9 small vents that pipe back to the main unit. That way it gets a good average of the hob, and one localized imbalance won't throw it off. I taped up 8 of the intakes, leaving only 1 of them active. Then I taped the mouth of a hefty-sized bag over the neck hole of a spacesuit. In the back of a bag, I poked a small hole and taped it over the remaining intake. Then I inflated the bag with pure O2 from the suit's tanks. Holy crap, the regulator thought. I better pull O2 out right away. Worked great. I decided not to wear a spacesuit after all. The atmospheric pressure was going to be fine. All I needed was oxygen. So I grabbed an O2 canister and breather mask from the medical bay. That way I had a lot more freedom of motion. It even had a rubber band to keep it on my face. Though I did need a spacesuit to monitor the actual hob oxygen level, now that the hob's main computer was convinced it was 100% O2. Though I did need a spacesuit to monitor the actual hob oxygen level, now that the hob's main computer was convinced it was 100% O2. Let's see, Martinez's spacesuit was in the rover, Johansson's was outwitting the regulator, Lewis's was serving as a water tank. I didn't want to mess with mine. That left me 2 spacesuits to work with. I grabbed Vogel's suit and activated the internal air sensors while leaving the helmet off. Once the oxygen dropped to 12%, I put the breather mask on. I watched it fall further and further. When it reached 1%, I cut power to the regulator. I may not be able to reprogram the regulator, but I can turn it off completely. The hob has emergency flashlights in many locations in case of critical power failure. I took the LED bulbs out of one and left the two frayed power wires very close together. Now when I turned it on, I got a small spark. Taking a canister of O2 from Vogel's suit, I attached a strap to both ends and slung it over my shoulder. Then I attached an air line to the tank and crimped it with my thumb. I turned on a very slow trickle of O2, small enough that I couldn't overpower the crimp. Standing on the table with a sparker in one hand and my oxygen line in the other, I reached up and gave it a try. Standing on the table, and holy crap, it worked. Blowing the O2 over the sparker, I flipped the switch on the flashlight and a wonderful jet of flame fired out of the tube. The fire alarm went off, of course, but I heard it so much lately I barely noticed it anymore. Then I did it again and again. Small bursts, nothing flashy. I was happy to take my time. I was elated. This is the best plan ever. Not only was I clearing out the hydrogen, I was making more water. Everything went great right up to the explosion. 1 minute I was happily burning hydrogen. The next I was on the other side of the hob and a lot of stuff was knocked over. I stumbled to my feet and saw the hob in disarray. My first thought was, my ears hurt like hell. Then I thought, I'm dizzy, and fell to my knees. Then I fell prone. I was that dizzy. I groped my head with both hands, looking for a head wound I desperately hoped would not be there. Nothing seemed to be amiss, but feeling all over my head and face revealed the true problem. My oxygen mask had been ripped off in the blast. I was breathing nearly pure nitrogen. The floor was covered in junk from all over the lab, from all over the hob. No hope of finding the medical O2 tank. No hope of finding anything in this mess before I passed out. Then I saw Lewis's suit hanging right where it belonged. It hadn't moved in the blast. It was heavy to start with and had 70 liters of water in it. I rushed over, quickly cranked on the O2, and stuck my head into the neck hole. I breathed a bit until the dizziness faded, then took a deep breath and held it. Still holding my breath, I glanced over to the spacesuit and hefty bag I used to outsmart the regulator. The bad news is I'd never removed them. The good news is the explosion removed them. 8 of the 9 intakes for the regulator were still bagged, but this one would at least tell the truth. Stumbling over to the regulator, I turned it back on. After a 2-second boot process, it was made to start up fast for obvious reasons. It immediately identified the problem. The shrill, low oxygen alarm blared throughout the hob as the regulator dumped pure oxygen into the atmosphere as fast as it safely could. Separating oxygen from the atmosphere is difficult and time-consuming, but adding it is as simple as opening a valve. I clambered over debris back to Lewis's spacesuit and put my head back in for more good air. Within 3 minutes, the regulator had brought the hob oxygen back up to par. I noticed for the first time how burned my clothing was. It was a good time to be wearing 3 layers of clothes. Mostly the damage was on my sleeves. The outer layer was gone. The middle layer was singed and burned clean through in places. The inner layer, my own uniform, was in reasonably good shape. Looks like I lucked out once again. Also, glancing at the hob's main computer, I saw the temperature had gone up to 15 degrees Celsius. Something very hot and very explodey had happened, and I wasn't sure what or how. And that's where I am now. Finding out what happened. Wondering what happened. After all that work and getting blown up, I'm exhausted. Tomorrow I'll have to do 1,000,000 equipment checks and try to figure out what exploded, but for now I just want to sleep. I'm in the rover again tonight. Even with the hydrogen gone, I'm reluctant to hang out in a hob that has a history of exploding for no reason. Plus, I can't be sure there isn't a leak. This time I brought a proper meal and something to listen to that isn't disco. Log entry Soul 41. I spent the day running full diagnostics on every system in the Hob. It was incredibly boring, but my survival depends on these machines, so it had to be done. I just can't assume an explosion did no long-term damage. I did the most critical tests first. Number one was the integrity of the Hob canvas. I felt pretty confident it was in good shape because I'd spent a few hours asleep in the rover before returning to the Hob and the pressure was still good. The computer reported no change in pressure over that time other than a minor fluctuation based on temperature. Then I checked the oxygenator. If that stops working and I can't fix it, I'm a dead man. No problems. Then the atmospheric regulator. Again, no problem. Heating unit, primary battery array, O2 and N2 storage tanks, water reclaimer, all three airlocks, lighting systems, main computer. On and on I went, feeling better and better as each system proved to be in perfect working order. Then got to hand it to NASA. They don't screw around when making this stuff. Then came the critical part, checking the dirt. I took a few samples from all over the Hob. Remember, it's all dirt flooring now, and made slides. With shaking hands, I put a slide into the microscope and brought the image up on screen. There they were, healthy, active bacteria doing their thing. Looks like I won't be starving to death on Sol 400 after all. I plopped down in a chair and let my breathing return to normal. Then I set about cleaning up the mess, and I had a lot of time to think about what had happened. So what happened? I have a theory. According to the main computer, during the blast, the internal pressure spiked to 1.4 atmospheres, and the temperature rose to 15 degrees Celsius in under a second. But the pressure quickly subsided back to 1 atmosphere. This would make sense if the atmospheric regulator were on, but I'd cut power to it. The temperature remained at 15 degrees Celsius for some time afterwards, so any heat expansion should still have been present. But the pressure dropped down again, so where did the extra pressure go? Raising the temperature and keeping the same number of atoms inside should permanently raise the pressure, but it didn't. I quickly realized the answer. The hydrogen, the only available thing to burn, combined with oxygen, hence combustion, and became water. Water is 1,000 times as dense as a gas, so the heat added to the pressure, and the transformation of hydrogen and oxygen into water brought it back down again. The million-dollar question is, where did all that oxygen come from? The whole plan was to limit oxygen and keep an explosion from happening. And it was working for quite a while before blowing up. I think I have my answer, and it all comes down to me brain farting. Remember when I decided not to wear a spacesuit? That decision almost killed me. The medical O2 tank mixes pure oxygen with surrounding air, then feeds it to you through a mask. The mask stays on your face with a little rubber band that goes around the back of your neck, not an airtight seal. I know what you're thinking, the mask leaked oxygen, but no, I was breathing the oxygen. While I was inhaling, I made a nearly airtight seal with the mask by sucking it to my face. The problem was exhaling. Do you know how much oxygen you absorb out of the air when you take a normal breath? I don't know either, but it's not 100%. Every time I exhaled, I added more oxygen to the system. What? Wait. Oh, I guess so. It just didn't occur to me, but it should have. If your lungs grabbed up all the oxygen, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation wouldn't work. I'm such a dumbass for not thinking of it, and my dumbassery almost got me killed. I'm really going to have to be more careful. It's a good thing I burned off most of the hydrogen before the explosion. Otherwise, that would have been the end. As it is, the explosion wasn't strong enough to pop the Hob, though it was strong enough to almost blast my eardrums in. This all started with me noticing a 60-liter shortfall in water production. Between deliberate burn-off and a bit of unexpected explosion, I'm back on track. The water reclaimer did its job last night and pulled 50 liters of the newly created water out of the air. It's storing it in Lewis's spacesuit, which I'll call the cistern from now on because it sounds cooler. The other 10 liters of water was directly absorbed by the dry soil. Lots of physical labor today. I've earned a full meal. And to celebrate my first night back in the Hob, I'll kick back and watch some crappy 20th century TV courtesy of Commander Lewis. The Dukes of Hazzard, eh? Let's give it a whirl. Log entry Soul 42. I slept in late today. I deserved it. After 4 nights of awful sleep in the rover, my bunk felt like the softest, most profoundly beautiful feather bed ever made. Eventually, I dragged my butt out of bed and finished some post-explosion cleanup. I moved the potato plants back in today, and just in time too. They're sprouting. They look healthy and happy. This isn't chemistry, medicine, bacteriology, nutrition analysis, explosion dynamics, or any other stuff I've been doing lately. This is botany. I'm sure I can at least grow some plants without screwing up. Right? You know what really sucks? I've only made 130 liters of water. I have another 470 liters to go. You'd think after almost killing myself twice, I'd be able to stop screwing around with hydrazine. But nope, I'll be reducing hydrazine and burning hydrogen in the Hob every 10 hours for another 10 days. I'll do a better job of it from now on. Instead of counting on a clean reaction, I'll do frequent hydrogen cleanings with a small flame. It'll burn off gradually instead of building up to kill mark levels. I'll have a lot of dead time. 10 hours for each tank of CO2 to finish filling. It only takes 20 minutes to reduce the hydrazine and burn the hydrogen. I'll spend the rest of the time watching TV. And seriously, it's clear that General Lee can outrun a police cruiser. Why doesn't Roscoe just go to the Duke farm and arrest them while they're not in the car? What? Whatevs. Chapter 6. I'll go to the end of chapter 7. Okay. Venkat Kapoor returned to his office, dropped his briefcase on the floor, and collapsed into his leather chair. He took a moment to look out the windows. His office in Building 1 afforded him a commanding view of the large park in the center of the Johnson Space Center complex. Beyond that, dozens of scattered buildings dominated the view all the way to the mud lake in the distance. Glancing at this computer screen, he noted 47 unread emails urgently demanding his attention. They could wait. Today had been a sad day. Today was the memorial service for Mark Watney. The president had also given a speech, praising Watney's bravery and sacrifice, and the quick actions of Commander Lewis in getting everyone else to safety. Commander Lewis and the surviving crew, via long-range communication from Hermes, gave eulogies for their departed comrade from deep space. They had another 10 months of travel yet to endure. The administrator had given a speech as well, reminding everyone that spaceflight is incredibly dangerous and we will not back down in the face of adversity. How cliché. They'd asked Venkat if he was willing to make a speech. He declined. What was the point? Watney was dead. Nice words from the director of Mars operations wouldn't bring him back. You okay, Venk? Came a familiar voice from the doorway. Venkat swiveled around. Guess so, he said. Teddy Sanders swept a rogue thread off his otherwise immaculate blazer. You could have given a speech. I didn't want to, you know that. Yeah, I know, I didn't want to either, but I'm the administrator of NASA. It's kind of expected. You sure you're okay? Yeah, I'll be fine. Good, Teddy said, adjusting his cufflinks. Let's get back to work then. Sure, Venkat shrugged. Let's start with you authorizing my satellite time. Teddy leaned against the wall with a sigh. This again. Yes, Venkat said. This again. What is the problem? Okay, run me through it. What exactly are you after? Venkat leaned forward. Ares 3 was a failure, but we can salvage something from it. We're funded for 5 Ares missions. I think we can get Congress to fund the 6th. I don't know, Venk. It's simple, Teddy, Venkat pressed on. They'd evac'd after 6 sols. There's almost an entire mission's worth of supplies up there. It would only cost a fraction of a normal mission. It normally takes 14 pre-supply probes to prep a site. We might be able to send what's missing in 3, maybe 2. Venk, the site got hit by a 175 km/h sandstorm. It'll be in really bad shape. That's why I want imagery, Venkat said. I just need a couple of shots of the site. We could learn a lot. Like what? You'd think we'd send people to Mars without being sure everything was in perfect working order? Everything doesn't have to be perfect, Venkat said quickly. Whatever's broken, we'd send replacements for. How will we know from imagery what's broken? It's just the first step. They'd evac because the wind was a threat to the MAF, but the Hob can withstand a lot more punishment. It might still be in one piece. And it'll be really obvious. If popped, it would completely blow out and collapse. If it's still standing, then everything inside will be fine. And the rovers are solid. They can take any sandstorm Mars has to offer. Just let me take a look, Teddy. That's all I want. Teddy paced through the windows and stared out at the vast expanse of buildings. You're not the only guy who wants satellite time, you know. We have Ares 4 supply missions coming up. We need to concentrate on Schiaparelli Crater. I don't get it, Teddy. What's the problem here? Venkat asked. I'm talking about securing us another mission. We have 12 satellites in orbit around Mars. I'm sure you can spare me 1 or 2 for a couple of hours. I can give you the windows for each one when they'll be at the right angles for the Ares 3 shots. It's not about satellite time, Venk, Teddy interrupted. Venkat froze. Then, but what? Teddy turned to face him. We're a public domain organization. There's no such thing as secret or secure information here. So, any imagery we take goes directly to the public. Again, so? Mark Watney's body will be within 20 meters of the Hob, maybe partially buried in sand, but still very visible and with his calm antenna sticking out of his chest. Any images we take will show that. Venkat stared, then glared. This is why you denied my imagery request for 2 months? Venk, come on. Really, Teddy? He said. You're afraid of a PR problem? The media's obsession with Watney's death is finally starting to taper off, Teddy said evenly. It's been bad press after bad press for 2 months. Today's memorial gives people closure, and the media can move on to some other story. The last thing we want is to dredge everything back up. So what do we do then? He's not going to decompose. He'll be there forever. Not forever, Teddy said. Within a year, he'll be covered in sand from normal weather activity. A year? Venkat said, rising to his feet. That's ludicrous. We can't wait a year for this. Why not? Ares 4 won't even launch for another 5 years. Plenty of time. Venkat took a deep breath and thought for a moment. Okay, consider this. Sympathy for Watney's family is really high. Ares 6 could bring the body back. We don't say that's the purpose of the mission, but we make it clear that would be part of it. If we framed it that way, we'd get more support for Congress. But not if we wait a year. In a year, people won't care anymore. Teddy rubbed his chin. Okay, that's a break. Mindy Parks stared at the ceiling. She had little else to do. The 3 a.m. shift was pretty dull. Only a constant stream of coffee kept her awake. Monitoring the status of satellites around Mars had sounded like an exciting proposition when she took the transfer. But the satellites tended to take care of themselves. Her job turned out to be sending emails as imagery became available. Master's degree in mechanical engineering, she muttered, and I'm working in an all-night photo booth. She sipped her coffee. A flicker on her screen announced that another set of images was ready for dispatch. She checked the name on the work order, Venkat Kapoor. She posted the data directly to internal servers and composed an email to Dr. Kapoor. As she entered the latitude and longitude of this image, she recognized the numbers. 31.2 degrees north, 28.5 degrees west. Acidalia planitia, Ares 3? Out of curiosity, she brought up the first of the 17 images. As she'd suspected, it was the Ares 3 site. She'd heard they were going to image it. Slightly ashamed of herself, she scoured the image for any sign of Mark Watney's dead body. After a minute of fruitless searching, she was simultaneously relieved and disappointed. Man, imagine being disappointed you can't find someone's dead body. She moved on to perusing the rest of the image. The hob was intact. Dr. Kapoor would be happy to see that. She brought the coffee mug to her lips, then froze. She mumbled to herself. She brought up the NASA intranet and navigated through the site to the specifics of the Ares missions. After some quick research, she picked up her phone. Hey, this is Mindy Park at SatCon. I need the mission logs for Ares 3. Where can I get them? Okay, thanks. After some more time on the intranet... The fuck is the intranet, brother? She leaned back in her seat. She no longer needed the coffee to keep awake. Picking up the phone again, she said, "Hello, security. This is Mindy Park in SatCon. I need the emergency contact number for Dr. Venkat Kapoor. Yes, it's an emergency." Another break. Mindy fidgeted in her seat as Venkat trudged in. To have the director of Mars operations visiting SATCOM was unusual. Seeing him in jeans and a t-shirt was even more unusual. "You Mindy Park?" he asked with the scowl of a man operating on 2 hours of sleep. "Yes," she quavered. "Sorry to drag you in." "I'm assuming you had a good reason. So?" She said, looking down. The imagery you ordered. Come here and look." He pulled another chair to her station and seated himself. "Is this about Watney's body? Is this why you're shook up?" No," she said. She winced at her awkwardness and pointed to the screen. Venkat inspected the image. "Looks like the hob's in one piece. That's good news. Solar array looks good. The rovers are okay, too. Main dish isn't around. No surprise there. What's the big emergency?" She said, touching her finger to the screen. "That." Venkat leaned in and looked closer. Just below the hob, beside the rovers, 2 white circles sat in the sand. Looks like hob canvas. Maybe the hob didn't do well after all. I guess pieces got torn off and, she interrupted. They look like rover pop tents. Venkat looked again. Probably right. How'd they get set up? Mindy asked. Venkat shrugged. Commander Lewis probably ordered them deployed during the evac. Not a bad idea. Have the emergency shelters ready in case the MOV didn't work and the hob breached. "Yeah, Mindy said, opening a document on her computer. "This is the entire mission log for Sols 1 through 6, from MDV touchdown to MAV emergency liftoff. Okay, and I read through it several times. They never threw out the pop tents." Her voice cracked at the last word. Venkat said, furrowing his brow. "They obviously did, but it didn't make it into the log." "They activated 2 emergency pop tents and never told anyone? That doesn't make a lot of sense, no. Maybe the storm messed with the rovers and the tents auto-deployed. So after auto-deploying, they detached themselves from the rovers and lined up next to each other 20 meters away." Venkat looked back to the image. "Well, obviously they activated somehow." "Why are the solar cells clean?" Mindy said, fighting back tears. "There was a huge sandstorm. Why isn't there sand all over them?" "A good wind could have done it," Venkat said, unsure. "Did I mention I never found Watney's body?" she said, sniffling. Venkat's eyes widened as he stared at the picture. "Oh," he said quietly. "Oh, God." Mindy put her hands over her face and sobbed quietly. Another break. Ooh, that's suspenseful. Woohoo, I like suspense here. "Crap," Annie Montrose said. "You've got to be kidding me." Teddy glared across his immaculate mahogany desk at his director of media relations, not helping Annie. He turned to his director of Mars operations. "How sure are we of this?" "Nearly 100%, Venkat said. "Crap," Annie said. Teddy moved the folder on his desk slightly to the right so it would line up with his mousepad. "It is what it is. We have to deal with it." Do you have any idea the magnitude of media circus this is going to be? She retorted. You don't have to face those reporters every day. I do. One day at a time, Teddy said. Vank, what makes you sure he's alive? For starters, no body. Nobody. I'm kidding. No body, Venkat explained. Also, the pop tents are set up, and the solar cells are clean. You can thank Mindy Park and Satcom for noticing all that, by the way. But, Venkat continued, his body could have been buried in the Sol 6 storm. The pop tents might have auto-deployed and wind could have blown them around. A 30-kilometer-per-hour windstorm sometime later would have been strong enough to clean the solar cells, but not strong enough to carry sand. It's not likely, but it's possible. So I spent the last few hours checking everything I could. Commander Lewis had 2 outings on Rover 2. The second was on Sol 5. According to the logs, after returning, she plugged it into the hob for recharging. It wasn't used again, and 13 hours later, they evac'd. He slid a picture across the desk to Teddy. That's one of the images from last night. As you can see, Rover 2 is facing away from the hob. The charging port is in the nose, and the cable isn't long enough to reach. Teddy absently rotated the picture to be parallel to the edges of his desk. She must have parked it facing the hob, or she wouldn't have been able to plug it in, he said. It's been moved since Sol 5. Yeah, Venkat said, sliding another picture to Teddy. But here's the real evidence. In the lower right of the image, you can see the MDV. It's been taken apart. I'm sure they wouldn't have done that without telling us. And the clincher is on the right of the image, Venkat pointed. The landing struts of the MAV. Looks like the fuel plant has been completely removed with considerable damage to the struts in the process. There's just no way that could have happened before liftoff. It would have endangered the MAV way too much for Lewis to allow it. Hey, Annie said, why not talk to Lewis? Let's go to Capcom and ask her directly. Rather than answer, Venkat looked to Teddy knowingly. Because, Teddy said, if Watney really is alive, we don't want the Ares 3 crew to know. What? Annie said. How can you not tell them? They have another 10 months on their trip home, Teddy explained. Space travel is dangerous. They need to be alert and undistracted. They're sad that they lost a crewmate, but they'd be devastated if they found out they'd abandoned him alive. Annie looked to Venkat. You're on board with this? It's a no-brainer, Venkat said. Let them deal with that emotional trauma when they're not flying a spaceship around. This will be the most talked about event since Apollo 11, Annie said. How will you keep it from them? Teddy shrugged. Easy. We control all communication with them. Hold on. Apollo 11. Now, if we're considering, like Ares 1 to be on the same par as Apollo 11, which, it kind of is, first touchdown on Moon versus Mars, then Ares 3 with, the critical failures and all that, that's kind of like Apollo 13, is it not? Of course, the fact that someone got fucked on Ares 3, whereas not on Apollo 11, is kind of a big difference, but still, I think there's more comparison with Apollo 13 than Apollo 11. I'm just being nitpicky as all hell. Teddy shrugged. Easy, we control all communication with them. Okay, Annie said, opening her laptop. When do you want to go public? What's your take? He asked. Annie said, we can hold the pics for nearly 24 hours before we're required to release them. We'll need to send out a statement along with them. We don't want people working it out on their own. We'd look like jackasses. Okay, Teddy agreed. Put together a statement. That'll be fun, she grumbled. Where do we go from here? Teddy asked Venkat. Step 1 is communication, Venkat said. From the pics, it's clear the comm array is ruined. We need another way to talk. Once we can talk, we can assess and make plans. Alright, Teddy said. Get on it. Take anyone you want from any department. Use as much overtime as you want. Find a way to talk to him. That's your only job right now. Got it? Annie, make sure nobody gets wind of this till we announce. Right, Annie said. Who else knows? Just the three of us and Mindy Park and Satcom, Venkat said. I'll have a word with her. Teddy stood and opened his cell phone. I'm going to Chicago. I'll be back tomorrow. Why? Annie asked. That's where Watney's parents live, Teddy said. I owe them a personal explanation before it breaks on the news. They'll be happy to hear his son's alive, Annie said. Yes, he's alive, Teddy said, but if my math is right, he's doomed to starve to death before we can possibly help him. I'm not looking forward to the conversation. Crap, Annie said thoughtfully. Nah, there's another break. There's a lot of breaks in this chapter. Nothing at all, Venkat groaned. Are you kidding me? You had 20 experts working for 12 hours on this. We have a multi-billion-dollar communications network. You can't figure out any way to talk to him. The two men in Venkat's office fidgeted in their chairs. He's got no radio, said Chuck. Actually, said Morris, he's got a radio, but he doesn't have a dish. Thing is, Chuck continued, without the dish, a signal would have to be really strong. Like melting the pigeon strong, Morris supplied. For him to get it, Chuck finished. We considered Martian satellites, Morris said. They're way closer, but the math doesn't work out. Even Super Surveyor 3, which has the strongest transmitter, would need to be 14 times more powerful. 17 times, Chuck said. 14 times, Morris asserted. No, it's 17. You forgot the amperage minimum for the heaters to keep the... Guys, Venkat interrupted. I get the idea. Sorry. Sorry if I'm grumpy, Venkat said. I got like 2 hours sleep last night. No problem, Morris said. Totally understandable, Chuck said. Okay, Venkat said. Explain to me how a single windstorm removed our ability to talk to Ares 3. Failure of imagination, Chuck said. Totally didn't see it coming, Morris agreed. They're like the comedic duo, you know, Fred and George Weasley, or maybe the twins in Lord of the Rings. Yeah, Merry and Pippin, right? Yeah. Ha! By that logic, I was about to say like Mark Watney is the personification of the ring, because you know he is influencing all these guys on Earth. Oh, that's funny. Let's not get hung up on parallels. How many backup communication systems does an Ares mission have? Venkat asked. 4, Chuck said. 3, Morris said. No, it's 4, Chuck corrected. He said backup systems, Morris insisted. That means not including the primary system. Oh, right. 3. So 4 systems total, then, Venkat said. Explain how he lost all 4. Well, Chuck said, the primary ran to the big satellite dish. It blew away in the storm. The rest of the backups were in the MAV. Yup, Morris agreed. The MAV is like a communication machine. It can talk to Earth, Hermes, even satellites around Mars if it has to. And it has 3 independent systems to make sure nothing short of a meteor strike can stop communication. Problem is, Chuck said, Commander Lewis and the rest of them took the MAV when they left. So 4 independent communication systems became 1, and that one broke, Morris finished. Venkat pitched the bridge of his nose. How could we overlook this? Chuck shrugged. Never occurred to us. We never thought someone would be on Mars without an MAV. I mean, come on, Morris said. What are the odds? Chuck turned to him. 1 in 3, based on empirical data. That's pretty bad if you think about it. Four pages left. Okay, that's another break. There's a break every other page, man. No. Yeah. This is gonna be rough. I mean, this was gonna be rough, and Annie knew it. Not only did she have to deliver the biggest mea culpa in NASA's history, every second of it would be remembered forever. Every movement of her arms, intonation of her voice, and expression on her face would be seen by millions of people over and over again. Not just in the immediate press cycle, but for decades to come. Every documentary made about Watney's situation would have this clip. She was confident that none of that concern showed on her face as she took to the podium. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," she said to the assembled reporters. "We have an important announcement to make. If you could all take your seats." "What is this about, Annie?" Brian Hess from NBC asked. "Something happened with Hermes?" "Please take your seats," Annie repeated. The reporters milled about and argued over seats for a brief time, then finally settled down. Classic reporters. "This is a short but very important announcement," Annie said. "I won't be taking any questions at this time, but we will have a full press conference with Q&A in about an hour. We have recently reviewed satellite imagery from Mars and have confirmed that astronaut Mark Watney is currently still alive." After one full second of utter silence, the room exploded with noise. I'm still very... Satellite imagery automatically goes to the conclusion that Mark Watney is alive. But earlier, Venkat said that if the math is correct, Mark Watney would have starved. How do they go to this conclusion without taking in the possibility that Mark Watney starved? It's just too big of a leap. My god. Yeah, you can like trust in his skills as a botanist, which, you know, that's what actually happened, but I feel they're being way too confident when they say that, you know, Mark Watney is currently still alive and they've confirmed it, you know? That's a jump in logic. A week after the stunning announcement, it was still the top story on every news network in the world. "I'm getting sick of daily press conferences," Venkat whispered to Annie. "I'm getting sick of hourly press conferences," Annie whispered back. The two stood with countless other NASA managers and executives bunched up on the small stage in the press room. They faced a pit of hungry reporters, all desperate for any scrap of new information. "Sorry I'm late," Teddy said, emerging from the side door. He pulled some flashcards out from his pocket, squared them in his hands, and then cleared his throat. In the 9 days since announcing Mark Watney's survival, we've received a massive show of support from all sectors. We're using this shamelessly every way we can." A small chuckle cascaded through the room. "Yesterday, at our request, the entire SETI network focused on Mars, just in case Watney was sending a weak radio signal. Turns out he wasn't, but it shows the level of commitment everyone has towards helping us. The public is engaged, and we will do our best to keep everyone informed. I've recently learned CNN will be dedicating a half-hour segment every weekday to reporting on just this issue. We will assign several members of our media relations team to that program so the public can get the latest information as fast as possible. We have adjusted the orbits of 3 satellites to get more view time on the Ares 3 sites and hope to catch an image of Mark outside soon. If we can see him outside, we'll be able to draw conclusions on his physical health based on stance and activities. The questions are many. How long can he last? How much food does he have? Can Ares 4 rescue him? How will we talk to him? The answers to these questions are not what we want to hear. I can't promise we'll succeed in rescuing him, but I can promise this. The entire focus of NASA will be to bring Mark Watney home. This will be our overriding and singular obsession until he is either back on Earth or confirmed dead on Mars." Last break. "Nice speech," Venkat said as he entered Teddy's office. "Meant every word of it," Teddy said. "Oh, I know. What can I do for you, Venk?" "I got an idea. Well, JPL has an idea. I'm the messenger." "I like ideas," Teddy said, gesturing to his seat. Venkat sat down. "We can rescue him with Ares 4. It's very risky. We ran the idea by the Ares 4 crew. Not only are they willing to do it, but now they're really pushing hard for it. Naturally, Teddy said, astronauts are inherently insane and really noble. What's the idea? Well, Venkat began, it's in the rough stages, but JPL thinks the MDV can be misused to save him. Ares 4 hasn't even been launched yet. Why misuse an MDV? Why not make something better? Yeah?
What do you want to eat? 还有点，你想明天吃你昨天做的 noodle？ 我们买了些面包 ，cheese。
Noodle?
You want to noodle?
Yeah.
我再做一点。
Sure.
Okay. 这个呢？
Oh, you got that? Oh.
爸爸过意不去。不过这个就一个东西不贵。
Cool.
不过你要打开试一下 ，work 不 work？ 不过要不要先充电？
I will.
你这个地方要经常洗。你找到了吗
No.
那我做点 noodle。
Yeah.
哥哥要吃 noodle。你想吃昨天的？
Fucking hate them, man. Alright. Well, Venkat began, it's in the rough stages, but JPL thinks the MDV can be misused to save him. Ares 4 hasn't even launched yet. Why misuse an MDV? Why not make something better? We don't have time to make a custom craft. Actually, he can't even survive till Ares 4 gets there, but that's a different problem. So tell me about the MDV. JPL strips it down, loses some weight, and adds some fuel tanks. Ares 4 crew lands at the Ares 3 site very efficiently. Then with a fuel burn, and I mean a full burn, they can lift off again. It can't get back to orbit, but they can go to the Ares 4 site on a lateral trajectory. That's, well, really scary. Then they have an MAV. How are they losing weight? Teddy asked. Don't they already have it as light as it can be? By removing safety and emergency equipment. Wonderful, Teddy said, so we'd be risking the lives of six more people. Yup, Venkat said. It would be safer to leave the Ares 4 crew in Hermes and only send the pilot down with the MDV, but that would mean giving up the mission and they'd rather risk death. They're astronauts, Teddy said. They're astronauts, Venkat confirmed. Well, that's a ludicrous idea and I'll never okay it. Work on some more, Venkat said. Try to make it safer. Do that. Any idea on how to keep him alive for 4 years? Nope. Work on that too. Will do, Venkat said. Teddy swiveled his chair and looked out the window to the sky beyond. Night was edging. What must it be like, he pondered. He's stuck out there. He must think he's totally alone and that we all gave up on him. What kind of effect does that have on a man's psychology? He turned back to Venkat. I wonder what he's thinking right now. And then, log entry Soul 61. How come Aquaman can control whales? They're mammals. Makes no sense. Oh, gee whiz. Another 15 pages to go until the end of chapter 7. Okay. Chapter 7. Log entry Soul 63. I finished making my water some time ago. I'm no longer in danger of blowing myself up. The potatoes are going nicely. Nothing has conspired to kill me in weeks. And 70s TV keeps me disturbingly more entertained than it should. Things are stable here on Mars. It's time to start thinking long term. Even if I find a way to tell NASA I'm alive, there's no guarantee they'll be able to save me. I need to be proactive. My stomach just grumbled. I need to figure out how to get to Ares 4. It won't be easy. Ares 4 will be landing at the Schiaparelli crater, 3,200 kilometers away. In fact, their MAV is already there. I know because I watched Martinez land it. It takes 18 months for the MAV to make its fuel, so that's the first thing NASA sends along. Sending it in 48 months early gives it plenty of time in case fuel reactions go slower than expected. But much more importantly, it means a precision soft landing can be done remotely by a pilot in orbit. Direct remote operation from Houston isn't an option. They're anywhere from 4 to 20 light minutes away. Ares 4's MAV spent 11 months getting to Mars. It left before us and got here around the same time we did. As expected, Martinez landed it beautifully. It was one of the last things we did before piling into our MDV and heading to the surface. Ah, the good old days when I had a crew with me. I'm lucky. 3,200 kilometers isn't that bad. It could have been up to 10,000 kilometers away. And because I'm on the flattest part of Mars, the first 650 kilometers is nice, smooth terrain. But the rest of it is nasty, rugged, crater-pocketed nightmare. Obviously, I'll have to use a rover. And guess what? They weren't designed for massive overland journeys. This is going to be a research effort with a bunch of experimentation. I'll have to become my own little NASA, figuring out how to explore far from the hub. The good news is I have a lot of time to figure it out. Almost 4 years. Some stuff is obvious. I'll need to use a rover. It will take a long time, so I'll need to bring supplies. I'll need to recharge en route, and rovers don't have solar cells, so I'll need to steal some from the Hobbs solar farm. During the trip, I'll need to breathe, eat, and drink. Lucky for me, the tech specs for everything are right here in the computer. I'll need to trick out a rover. Basically, it'll have to be a mobile hub. I'll pick Rover 2 as my target. We have a certain bond after I spent 2 days in it during the great hydrogen scare of Sol 37. There's too much to think about all at once, so for now I'll just think about power. Our mission had a 10-kilometer operational radius. Knowing we wouldn't take straight line paths, NASA designed the rovers to go 35 kilometers on a full charge. That presumes flat, reasonable terrain. Each rover has a 9,000 watt-hour battery. Step 1 is to loot Rover 1's battery and install it in Rover 2. Ta-da, I just doubled my full charge range. There's just one complication: heating. Part of the battery power goes to heating the rover. Mars is really cold. Normally we were expected to do all EVAs in under 5 hours, but I'll be living in it 24.5 hours a day. According to the specs, the heating equipment soaks at 400 watts. Keeping it on would eat up 9,800 watt-hours per day, over half of my power supply every day. But I do have a free source of heat, me. A couple million years of evolution gave me warm-blooded technology. I can just turn off the heater and weigh layers. The rover has good insulation too. It'll have to be enough. I need every bit of power. According to my boring math, moving the rover eats 200 watt-hours of juice to go 1 kilometer. So using the full 18,000 watt-hours for motion, minus a negligible amount for computer, life support, etc., gets me 90 kilometers of travel. Now we're talking. I'll never actually get 90 kilometers on a single charge. I'll have hills to deal with and rough terrain, sand, etc., but it's a good ballpark. It tells me that it would take at least 35 days of travel to get to Ares 4. It will probably be more like 50, but that's plausible at least. At the rover's blazing 25 km per hour top speed, it will take me 3.5 hours before I run the battery down. I can drive in twilight and save the sunny part of the day for charging. This time of year I get about 13 hours of light. How many solar cells will I have to pilfer from the Hobbs farm? Thanks to the fine taxpayers of America, I have over 100 square meters of the most expensive solar paneling ever made. It has an astounding 10.2% efficiency, which is good because Mars doesn't get as much sunlight as Earth. Only 500 to 700 watts per square meter, compared to the 1400 Earth gets. Long story short, I need to bring 28 square meters of solar cell. That's 14 panels. I can put 2 stacks of 7 on the roof. They'll stick out over the edges, but as long as they're secure, I'm happy. Every day after driving, I'll spread them out, then wait all day. Man, it'll be dull. Well, to start, tomorrow's mission: transfer Rover 1's battery to Rover 2. Sol 64. Log entry. Sometimes things are easy and sometimes they're not. Getting the battery out of Rover 1 was easy. I removed 2 clamps on the undercarriage and it dropped right out. The cabling was easy to detach too, just a couple of complicated plugs. Attaching it to Rover 2, however, is another story. There's nowhere to put it. The thing is huge. I was barely able to drag it, and that's in Mars gravity. It's just too big. There's no room in the undercarriage for a second one. There's no room on the roof either. That's where the solar cells will go. There's no room inside the cabin, and it wouldn't fit through the airlock anyways. But fear not. I found a solution. For emergencies completely unrelated to this one, NASA provided 6 square meters of extra hob canvas, and some really impressive resin. The same kind of resin, in fact, that saved my life on Sol 6. In the event of a hob breach, everyone would run to the airlocks. Procedure was to let the hob pop rather than die trying to prevent it. Then we'd suit up and assess the damage. Once we found the breach, we'd seal it with the spare canvas and resin, then reinflate and we're good as new. The 6 square meters of spare canvas was a convenient 1 by 6 meters. I cut 10 centimeter wide strips, then used them to make a sort of harness. I used the resin and straps to make 2 10-meter circumference loops. Then I put a big patch of canvas on each end. I now had poor man's saddlebags for my rover. This is getting more and more wagon train every day. The resin sets almost instantly, but it gets stronger if you wait an hour. So I did. Then I suited up and headed out to the rover. I dragged the battery to the side of the rover and looped one end of the harness around it. Then I threw the other end over the roof. On the other side, I filled it with rocks. When the 2 weights were roughly equal, I was able to pull the rocks down and bring the battery up. Interesting. I unplugged Rover 2's battery and plugged it in Rover 1's. Then I went through the airlock to the rover and checked all systems. Everything was A-OK. I drove the rover around a bit to make sure the harness was secure. I found a few largish rocks to drive over just to shake things up. The harness held. For a short time, I wondered how to splice the second battery's leads into the main power supply. My conclusion was, screw it. There's no need to have a continuous power supply. When battery 1 runs out, I can go out, unplug battery 1, and plug in battery 2. Why not? It's a 10-minute EVA once per day. I'd have to swap batteries again when I'm recharging them, but again, so what? I spent the rest of the day sweeping off the solar cell farm. Soon I shall be looting it. Log entry Sol 65. The solar cells were a lot easier to manage than the battery. They're thin, light, and just lying around on the ground. And I had one additional bonus. I was the one who set them up in the first place. Well, okay, it wasn't just me. Vogel and I worked together on it. And boy did we drill on it. We spent almost an entire week drilling on the solar array alone. Then we drilled more whenever they figured out we had spare time. The array was mission critical. If we broke the cells or rendered them useless, the hob wouldn't be able to make power and the mission would end. You might wonder what the rest of the crew was doing while we assembled the array. They were setting up the hob. Remember, everything in my glorious kingdom came here in boxes. We had to set it up on Sols 1 and 2. Each solar cell is on a lightweight lattice that holds it at a 14-degree angle. I'll admit I don't know why it's a 14-degree angle, something about maximizing solar energy. Anyways, removing the cells was simple, and the hob can spare them. With the reduced load of only supporting 1 human instead of 6, a 14% energy production loss is irrelevant. And then it was time to stack them on the rover. I considered removing the rock sample container. It's nothing more than a large canvas bag attached to the roof, way too small to hold the solar cells, but after some thought I left it in there. figuring it would provide a good cushion. The cells stacked well. They were made, too, for transport to Mars, and the 2 stacks sat nicely on the roof. They hung over the left and right edges, but I won't be going through any tunnels, so I don't care. With some more abuse of the emergency hob material, I made straps and tied the cells down. The rover has external handles near the front and back. They're there to help us load rocks on the roof. They made perfect anchor points for the straps. I stood back and admired my work. Hey, I earned it. It wasn't even noon and I was done. I came back to the hob, had some lunch, and worked on my crops for the rest of the sol. It's been 39 sols since I planted the potatoes, which is about 40 Earth days, and it was time to reap and resow. They grew even better than I expected. Mars has no insects, parasites, or blights to deal with, and the hob maintains perfect growing temperature and moisture at all times. They were small compared to the taters you usually eat, but that's fine. All I wanted was to support growing new plants. I dug them up, being careful to leave their plants alive. Then I cut them up into small pieces with 1 eye each and reseeded them into new dirt. If they keep growing this well, I'll be able to last a good long time here. After all that physical labor, I deserved a break. I rifled through Johansson's computer today and found an endless supply of digital books. Looks like she's a big fan of Agatha Christie, the Beatles. Looks like she's a big fan of Agatha Christie. The Beatles, Christie, I guess she's an Anglophile or something. I remember liking Hercule Poirot TV specials back when I was a kid. I'll start with The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Looks like that's the first one. Log entry Sol 66. The time has come for some missions. NASA gets to name their missions after gods and stuff, so why can't I? Henceforth, rover experimental missions will be called Sirius missions. Sirius 1 will begin tomorrow. The missions start with fully charged batteries and solar cells on the roof. Drive it until I run out of power and see how far I get. I won't be an idiot. I'm not driving directly away from the hob. I'll drive a half-kilometer stretch back and forth. I will be within a short walk of home at all times. Tonight I'll charge up both batteries so I can be ready for a little test drive tomorrow. I estimate 3.5 hours of driving, so I'll need to bring fresh CO2 filters. And with the heater off, I'll wear 3 layers of clothes. Log entry Sol funny number. Sirius 1 is complete. More accurately, Sirius 1 was aborted after 1 hour. I guess you could call it a failure, but I prefer the term learning experience. Things started out fine. I drove to a nice flat spot a kilometer from the hob, then started going back and forth over a 500-meter stretch. I quickly realized this would be a crappy test. After a few laps, I had compressed the soil enough to have a solid path. Nice, hard ground, which makes for abnormally high energy efficiency. Nothing like it would be on a long trip. So I shook it up a bit. I drove around randomly, making sure to stay within a kilometer of the hob, a much more realistic test. After an hour, things started to get cold, and I mean really cold. The rovers are always cold when you first get in it. When you haven't disabled the heater, it warms up right away. I expected it to be cold, but Jesus Christ. Man, he's saying God's name in vain in this book. I was fine for a while. My own body heat plus 3 layers of clothing kept me warm, and the rover's insulation is top-notch. The heat that escaped my body just warmed up the interior. But there's no such thing as perfect insulation, and eventually the heat left to the great outdoors, while I got colder and colder. Within an hour, I was chattering and numb. Enough was enough. There was no way I could do a long trip like this. Turning the heater on, I drove straight back to the hob. Once I got back, I sulked for a while. All my brilliant plans foiled by thermodynamics. Curse you, entropy. I'm in a bind. The heater will eat my battery power every day. I could turn it down, I guess. Be a little cold but not freezing to death. Even then, I'd still lose at least a quarter. This will require some thoughts. I have to ask myself, what would Hercule Poirot do? I'll have to put my little gray cells to work on the problem. Gee whiz. Well, crap. Oh, log entry Soul 68. Well, crap. I came up with a solution, but remember when I burned rocket fuel in the hob? This will be more dangerous. I'm going to use the RTG. The RTG, or radioisotope thermoelectric generator, is a big box of plutonium. But not the kind used in nuclear bombs. No. This plutonium is way more dangerous. Plutonium-238 is an incredibly unstable isotope. It's so radioactive that it'll get red hot all by itself. As you can imagine, a material that can literally fry an egg with radiation is kind of dangerous. The RTG houses the plutonium, catches the radiation in the form of heat, and turns it into electricity. It's not a reactor. The radiation can't be increased or decreased. It's a purely natural process happening at the atomic level. As long ago as the 1960s, NASA began using RTGs to power unmanned probes. They have lots of advantages over solar power. They're not affected by storms, they work day or night, they're entirely internal, so you don't need delicate solar cells all over your probe. But they never used large RTGs on manned missions until the Ares program. Why not? It should be pretty obvious why not. They didn't want to put astronauts next to a glowing hot ball of radioactive death. I'm exaggerating a little. The plutonium is inside a bunch of pellets, each one sealed and insulated to prevent radiation leakage, even if the outer container is breached. So for the Ares program, they took the risk. And Ares program is all about the MAV. It's the single most important component. It's one of the few systems that can't be replaced or worked around. It's the only component that causes a complex mission scrub if it's not working. Solar cells are great in the short term, and they're good for the long term if you have humans around to clean them. But the MAV sits alone for years quietly making fuel, then just kind of hangs out until its crew arrives. Even doing nothing, it needs power, so NASA can monitor it remotely and run self-checks. The prospect of scrubbing a mission because a solar cell got dirty was unacceptable. They needed a more reliable source of power. So the MAV comes equipped with an RTG. It has 2.6 kilograms of plutonium-238, which makes about 1,500 watts of heat. It can turn that into 100 watts of electricity. The MAV runs on that until the crew arrive. 100 watts isn't enough to keep the heater going. But I don't care about the electrical output. I want the heat. A 1,500 watt heater is so warm I'll have to tear insulation out of the rover to keep it from getting too hot. As soon as the rovers were unstowed and activated, Commander Lewis had the joy of disposing of the RTG. She detached it from the MAV, drove 4 kilometers away, and buried it. However safe it may be, it's still a radioactive core, and NASA didn't want it too close to their astronauts. The mission parameters don't give a specific location to dump the RTG, just at least 4 kilometers away, so I'll have to find it. I have 2 things working for me. First, I was assembling solar panels with Vogel when Commander Lewis drove off, and I saw she headed due south. Also, she planted a 3-meter pole with a bright green flag over where she buried it. Green always shows extremely well against the Martian terrain. It's made to ward us off in case we get lost in our rover EVA later on. So my plan is, head south 4 kilometers, then search around until I see the green flag. Having rendered Rover 1 unusable, I'll have to use my mutant rover for the trip. I can make a useful test mission of it. I'll see how well the battery harness holds up to a real journey and how well the solar cells do strapped to the roof. I'll call it Sirius 2. Why so serious? Oh, I'm so thirsty, so hungry, oh my god. Log entry Soul 69. Funny number. I'm no stranger to Mars, I've been here a long time. but I've never been out of the sight of the hob before today. You wouldn't think that would make a difference, but it does. As I made my way towards the RTG's burial site, it hit me. Mars is a barren wasteland, and I am completely alone here. I already knew that, of course, but there's a difference between knowing it and really experiencing it. All around me, there was nothing but familiar faces. I'm kidding. All around me, there was nothing but dust, rocks, and endless empty desert in all directions. The planet's famous red colors from iron oxide coating everything. So it's not just a desert. It's a desert so old it's literally rusting. The hob is my only hint of civilization, and seeing it disappear made me way more uncomfortable than I like to admit. I put those thoughts behind me by concentrating on what was in front of me. I found the RTG right where it was supposed to be, 4 kilometers due south of the hob. It wasn't hard to find. Commander Lewis had buried it atop a small hill. She probably wanted to make sure everyone could see the flag, and it worked great. Except instead of avoiding it, I beelined to it and I dug it up. Not exactly what she was going for. It was a large cylinder with heat sinks all around it. I could feel the warmth it gave off even through my suit's gloves. That's really disconcerting, especially when you know the root cause of the heat is radiation. No point in putting it on the roof. My plan was to have it in the cabin anyways, so I brought it in with me, turned off the heater, and then drove back to the hob. In the 10 minutes it took to get home, even with the heater off, the interior of the rover became an uncomfortably hot 37 degrees Celsius. The RTG would definitely be able to keep me warm. The trip also proved that my rigging worked. The solar cells and extra batteries stayed beautifully in place while traversing 8 kilometers of random terrain. I declare Sirius 2 to be a successful mission. I spent the rest of the day vandalizing the interior of the rover. The pressure compartment is made of carbon composite. Just inside that is insulation, which is covered by hard plastic. I used a sophisticated method to remove sections of plastic with a hammer, and then carefully remove the solid foam insulation with a hammer again. After tearing out some insulation, I suited up and took the RTG outside. Soon the rover cooled down again, and I brought it back in. I watched as the temperature rose slowly, nowhere near as fast as it had on my trip back from the burial site. I cautiously removed more insulation in the hammer and checked again. After a few more cycles of this, I had enough insulation torn out that the RTG could barely keep up with it. In fact, it was a losing battle. Over time, the heat would slowly leach out. That's fine. I can turn on the heater for short bursts when necessary. I brought the insulation pieces with me back to the hob. Using advanced construction techniques, or duct tape, I reassembled some of them into a square. I figured if things get really cold, I can tape that to a bare patch in the rover, and the RTG will be winning the heat fight. Tomorrow, Sirius 3, which is just Sirius 1 again, but without freezing. There's 3 more pages. Log entry Soul 70. Today I write to you from the rover. I'm halfway through Sirius 3 and things are going well. I set out at first light and drove laps around the hob, trying to stay on untouched ground. The first battery lasts just under 2 hours. After a quick EVA to switch the cables, I got back to driving. When all was said and done, I had driven 81 kilometers in 3 hours and 27 minutes. That's very good. Mind you, the lab around the hob is really flat, as is all of Acidalia planitia. I have no idea what my efficiency would be on the nastier land en route to Ares 4. The second battery still had a little juice left, but I can't just run it down all the way before I stop. Remember, I need life support while recharging. The CO2 gets absorbed through a chemical process, but if the fan that pushes it isn't working, I'll choke. The oxygen pump is also kind of important. After my drive, I set up the solar cells. It was hard work. Last time I had Vogel's help. They aren't heavy, but they're awkward. After setting up half of them, I figured out I could drag them rather than carry them, and that sped things up. Now I'm just waiting for the batteries to recharge. I'm bored, so I'm updating the log. I have all the Poirot books in my computer. That'll help. It's going to take 12 hours to recharge after all. What's that you say? 12 hours is wrong? I'd said 13 hours earlier? Well, my friend, let me set you straight. The RTG is a generator. It's a paltry amount of power compared to what the rover consumes, but it's not nothing. It's 100 watts. It'll cut an hour off my total recharge time. Why not use it? I wonder what NASA would think about me messing around with the RTG like this. They'd probably hide under their desks and cuddle with their slide rules for comfort. Log entry Sol 31. 71, sorry. As predicted, it took 12 hours to charge the batteries to full. I came straight home as soon as they were done. Time to make plans for Sirius 4, and I think it will be a multi-day field trip. Looks like power and battery recharging are solved. Food's not a problem, there's plenty of space to store things. Water is even easier than food. I need 2 liters per day to be comfortable. When I do my trip to Ares 4 for real, I'll need to bring the oxygenator, but it's big and I don't want to screw with it right now, so I'll rely on O2 and CO2 filters for Sirius 4. CO2 isn't a problem. I started this grand adventure with 1,500 hours of CO2 filters, plus another 720 for emergency use. All systems use standard filters. Apollo 13 taught us an important lesson. Since then, I've used 131 hours of filter on various EVAs. I have 2,089 left, 87 days worth, plenty. Oxygen's a little trickier. The rover was designed to support 3 people for 2 days, plus some reserve for safety, so its O2 tanks can hold enough to last me 7 days, not enough. Mars has almost no atmospheric pressure. The inside of the rover has 1 atmosphere, so the oxygen tanks are on the inside, less pressure differential to deal with. Why does that matter? It means I can bring along other oxygen tanks and equalize them with the rover's tanks without having to do an EVA. So today, I detached one of the Hobbs 2 25-liter liquid oxygen tanks and brought it into the rover. According to NASA, a human needs 588 liters of oxygen per day to live. Compressed liquid O2 is about 1,000 times as dense as gaseous O2 in a comfortable atmosphere. Long story short, with the Hobb tank, I have enough O2 to last 49 days. That'll be plenty. Sirius 4 will be a 20-day trip. That may seem a bit long, but I have a specific goal in mind. Besides, my trip to Ares 4 will be at least 40 days. This is a good scale model. While I'm away, the Hobb can take care of itself, but the potatoes are an issue. I'll saturate the ground with most of the water I have. Then I'll deactivate the atmospheric regulator so it doesn't pull water out of the air. It'll be crazy humid and water will condense on every surface. That'll keep the potatoes well watered while I'm away. A bigger problem is CO2. The potatoes need to breathe. I know what you're thinking. Mark, old chap, you produce CO2. It's all part of the majestic circle of nature. The problem is, where will I put it? Sure, I exhale CO2 with every breath, but I don't have any way to store it. I could turn off the oxygenator and atmospheric regulator and just fill the Hobb with my breath over time, but CO2 is deadly to me. I need to release a bunch at once and run away. Remember the MAV fuel plant? It collects CO2 from the Martian atmosphere. A 10-liter tank of compressed liquid CO2 vented into the Hobb will be enough CO2 to do the trick. That'll take less than a day to create. So that's everything. Once I vent the CO2 into the Hobb, I'll turn off the atmospheric regulator and oxygenator, dump a ton of water on the crops, and head out. Sirius 4, a huge step in my rover research, and I can start tomorrow. That's chapter 7. I admit I kind of sped through that. Because my stomach was grumbling every 10 seconds, dude. My throat is fucked. My mouth is fucked. This puzzle is also kind of fucked. See you later. I don't have much of a stuff to converse with you today.